Reform UK's leader Nigel Farage is promising mass deportation of illegal immigrants if he wins the next general election. John Craig.
He controversially, when he was asked, what about sending people to Afghanistan? Are you worried about if they get tortured by the Taliban? Well, he basically said, I'm really sorry, but we can't be responsible for everything that happens in the whole of the world. He unveiled a plan, should he become Prime Minister. Well, they're ahead in the polls, let's put it that way. And it's mass deportations, he says, to fix what he calls a massive crisis.
Nigel Farage has built his entire career on being the man who never backs down, the political brawler who thrives on sticking to his guns no matter how unpopular or controversial the stance may be. From his days leading UKIP through the Brexit referendum to his countless television appearances railing against the establishment, Farage has always sold himself as a man of conviction, a figure who would rather go down fighting than ever compromise.
Since July last year, 5,300 foreign national offenders have been returned. This is our plan for change in action. Well, and he went on to say, whose side are you on? So a very uncompromising Nigel Farage there. The Prime Minister has this afternoon responded, we are tackling illegal migration.
That's why his latest announcement has sent shockwaves through the political world. A massive U-turn that few saw coming, and one that is already shaking up debates, not just in Britain, but across Europe. The announcement wasn't made in a dusty corner of Parliament or buried in a late-night press release. Farage knows the value of spectacle, and he delivered it in front of cameras with the same showman energy that has defined his career.
The figures earlier in the week were not good. I mean, they were very bad. I mean, two of the things that have really damaged the government this week. First of all, that controversial High Court ruling, which suggests that 7 councils are considering taking similar action to Epping. 11 are investigating, and about the Epping hotel there, absolutely caught the government on the hop there. They didn't really know how to respond. They don't know where to put all these people. If, as is possible, of course, there's an awful lot more challenges. We have here a Sky News spreadsheet.
His tone was serious, his words deliberate, and unlike his usual fiery delivery, there was almost a hint of restraint. When he finally delivered the punchline, that he was reversing his stance on an issue that had defined his platform for years, the audience gasped. Farage, the man who made a career out of calling other politicians flip-floppers, had just executed the kind of political somersault no one expected. For his supporters, the announcement was nothing short of disorienting. These are the voters who have always admired Farage, precisely because he seemed untouchable by the usual games of politics. He positioned himself as the anti-politician, the one man who could never be swayed by focus groups or polling numbers. And yet here he was, admitting that the circumstances had changed, that new realities demanded new positions. Farage framed it as pragmatism rather than surrender. A wise man, he declared, is not someone who clings to old positions for pride's sake, but someone who adapts when the facts change. It was as if he was speaking directly to critics who would inevitably label him a hypocrite. The media, of course, erupted. Headlines blared about betrayal, hypocrisy, and desperation. For a man who has thrived on attention, Farage surely expected the frenzy, but even he must have been taken aback at the sheer volume of reactions. Newspapers that once celebrated him now questioned his motives. Was this about survival, a political calculation to stay relevant in a rapidly shifting landscape? Or was it, as he insisted, a sincere recognition that the world had changed? The pundits debated endlessly, but what was clear was that the U-turn had instantly reset the political conversation. His opponents wasted no time capitalizing on the move. Rival politicians mocked him, reminding voters of the countless times Farage had sneered at others for doing exactly what he had just done. One MP quipped that Farage had become the very thing he swore to destroy. Another pointed out that the timing of the announcement seemed suspicious, coming just as polls showed his influence waning among younger voters. To them, it was less about principle and more about clinging to relevance in a political world that is increasingly dominated by new voices. But Farage has always been a master of spin, and he leaned into the storm. In follow-up interviews, he insisted that his reversal was proof of strength, not weakness. "Do you want a leader," he asked rhetorically, "who refuses to admit when circumstances change? Or do you want someone honest enough to say, 'I was wrong, the facts are different now, and I'll adjust accordingly'?" By recasting his U-turn as a kind of moral courage, Farage sought to transform the narrative from betrayal to bravery, and for a portion of his base, it worked. Many loyalists applauded his ability to adapt, praising him for refusing to let stubbornness get in the way of progress. The deeper question, though, is what this means for the wider political scene. Farage's brand has always been built on certainty, on presenting himself as the one man willing to say what others won't. A massive U-turn risks undermining that image. If he can change on this issue, critics argue, what's stopping him from changing on others? For years, he's hammered away at the idea that the establishment is untrustworthy precisely because it bends and shifts with the wind. Now, whether he likes it or not, he's given his opponents the ammunition to paint him with the same brush. And yet, history suggests that Farage has a knack for turning setbacks into opportunities. After all, he has resigned and returned to politics multiple times, each time claiming it was his last act, only to re-emerge with fresh momentum. His career is littered with supposed endings that turned into new beginnings. Could this U-turn be another act in that familiar cycle? If so, it may not matter whether pundits call it hypocrisy. What matters is whether Farage can reframe the debate in a way that benefits him, and if anyone knows how to do that, it's him. There's also the question of timing. Politics is as much about the moment as it is about the message. By making this announcement now, Farage has managed to dominate the news cycle at a time when other stories might have overshadowed him. Instead of fading into irrelevance, he's once again placed himself at the centre of the national conversation. For a man who thrives on being talked about, that alone is a victory. His critics may sneer, but they're still talking about him, and in politics, being talked about is often half the battle. The reaction from the public has been predictably divided. Some supporters feel betrayed, believing that Farage has abandoned the very principles that drew them to him. Others admire his candour and willingness to change. Meanwhile, undecided voters who had previously written him off as too rigid are now reconsidering whether he might actually be capable of compromise and pragmatism. In a strange way, this U-turn has expanded his audience, even as it risks alienating his core. That paradox may define the next chapter of his career. Farage's legacy has always been tied to his ability to tap into emotions: anger, frustration, resentment, and pride. This announcement adds a new dimension: vulnerability. By admitting that his old stance was no longer tenable, he has shown a rare crack in his armour. Whether that crack makes him appear human or simply weak will depend on how he manages the narrative in the coming months. If he can convince the public that his reversal is evidence of growth, he may yet turn this potential disaster into a triumph. One thing is certain: this move proves once again that Nigel Farage is not done shaping headlines. Love him or loathe him, he remains a political force who understands the power of drama. His massive U-turn will be dissected, debated, and replayed endlessly, not just because of what it means for policy, but because of what it says about him. In the end, that may be his true genius, not the policies themselves, but his ability to keep himself at the centre of the story, no matter the cost.